Trump claims Venezuela's Maduro is a drug trafficking threat to the U.S. Does the data back him up? The recent escalation of tensions between Washington and Caracas, which has led to the United States deploying at least 7 warships to the southern Caribbean, can be traced back to a particular day. On August 7th, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced a $50 million reward for information leading to the arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, who has been facing formal drug trafficking charges from the Justice Department since 2020. Bondi declared that Maduro is one of the most powerful drug traffickers in the world and a threat to the national security of the United States. Caracas has always denied these accusations, but within hours, more than 4,000 U.S. military personnel were deployed to Caribbean waters. Days later, more ships, submarines, and aerial intelligence units joined them. The rapid escalation of the crisis, just days after the Maduro government and the Trump administration celebrated a prisoner exchange and the resumption of Venezuelan oil exports through Chevron, has surprised many and opened rifts within the White House itself, where a faction opposed to Chavismo, for ideological reasons, is balanced by those who would prefer to avoid dangerous confrontations. Donald Trump came to the White House as a president of peace, and the drumbeat from some sectors of the Venezuelan opposition and congressmen from South Florida doesn't fit with the president's message. A U.S. government official with knowledge of Venezuela told CNN, requesting anonymity because he was not authorized to speak on the matter. But beyond the rhetoric, it is striking that the White House is confronting Maduro over alleged ties to drug trafficking, and not by demanding he restore democracy in Venezuela. Allegations involving the Miraflores presidential palace in cocaine trafficking have existed for at least a decade. So why this new initiative in recent weeks? Bondi has not presented conclusive evidence of the Venezuelan leader's alleged role in international drug trafficking. At the same time, Caracas has flatly rejected the claims. For there to be a cartel, either you produce the drugs, you process it, or you traffic it. And if there is no cultivation, production, or drug trafficking in Venezuela, how can there be a cartel? It's unsustainable. Venezuelan Congresswoman Blanca Ecout told CNN, referring to Cartel de los Soles, an alleged drug trafficking organization that the United States claims is led by Maduro and that the Trump administration declared a terrorist organization a few weeks ago. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, Venezuela is not a cocaine-producing country. Almost all coca crops, the main ingredient of cocaine, are concentrated in Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. Colombia in particular has seen its cocaine production grow dramatically in recent years, due both to an increase in cultivation area, almost 100,000 hectares more since 2020, and, more significantly, because of higher yields in refining the product, according to UN researchers. In other words, more coca leaves are being grown. And at the same time, each leaf produces more cocaine. Of the 3,700 tons of coca produced worldwide, more than 2,500 tons come from Colombia, while Venezuela does not appear on production maps, according to the latest UNODC report published in June. Investigators from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, reached similar conclusions, writing in their annual report published in March that 84% of the cocaine seized in the U.S. comes from Colombia. In the 4 pages dedicated to cocaine trafficking, Venezuela is not mentioned. Colombia and Peru are primarily mentioned among producers, while Ecuador, Central America, and Mexico are mentioned among transit countries. The majority of Colombian cocaine is being trafficked north along the Pacific coast, says UNODC. Although transit through Venezuela is not ruled out, other countries are identified as emerging trends in international drug markets, such as Ecuador, where the sharp increase in homicides is linked to the rise in drug trafficking. According to the UN, This is an analysis that the State Department does not dispute either, at least behind closed doors, suggesting that the resources deployed in the Caribbean could be more effective elsewhere. It's strange that we don't see more boats heading to the Pacific, or the criminalization of more Colombian groups, a U.S. diplomat told CNN, who also asked not to be identified because he was not authorized to discuss these issues. Former U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr seemed to suggest the same thing when he revealed the first drug trafficking accusations against Maduro in 2020, pointing to the Venezuelan government as a facilitator in the transportation of up to 250 tons of cocaine annually, which represents a tiny amount in global drug volumes and less than 10% of production. The Pacific route also dominates UNODC drug seizure statistics, with Colombia 37%, Ecuador 8.8%, and Panama 4.2% as the countries in the region with the largest quantities of cocaine hydrochloride. Venezuela ranks 6th among Latin American countries in terms of seizures, with less than 2%. Although United Nations data appears to contradict the White House narrative, the reality is more complex. The movement of 250 tons of cocaine annually, which Barr accused the Venezuelan government of facilitating, is minor compared to global trafficking, 3,700 tons, according to the UNODC. But it is still a significant amount of illicit trade that allegedly generates multi-million-dollar profits for Maduro. At the time, Barr also failed to provide evidence of the illegal trafficking he was alleging. The Venezuelan government coalition admits that drug trafficking exists in the country, but not that it promotes it. ECOUT, for example, told CNN that in the past year, Maduro's security forces have seized 490 aircraft and 94 vessels used to transport cocaine, data that CNN cannot independently verify. And while Caracas claims to be waging war on drugs, there is also evidence of direct involvement in drug trafficking from the highest levels of government. In November 2016, a federal court in New York found 2 members of the presidential family, nephews of Venezuelan First Lady Cilia Flores, guilty of conspiring to traffic cocaine to the United States after they were arrested by the DEA in Haiti. Both were later returned to Venezuela in a prisoner exchange. But even more striking is the role of Hugo El Pollo Carvajal, a former high-ranking Venezuelan official who, on June 25th, pleaded guilty to conspiring to import cocaine into the United States and to narco-terrorism charges. This came after a lengthy trial in which U.S. prosecutors accused him of exchanging firearms for cocaine shipments with the now-defunct FARC guerrillas, whose dissidents in Colombia control some of the key regions for narcotics production. The deal was reached after a lengthy extradition process from Spain and just days before his trial was to begin in New York. At the time, the Miami Herald reported that Carvajal, who was also accused of being part of Cartel de las Soles, was cooperating with U.S. prosecutors, providing evidence against Maduro in exchange for a reduced sentence, something CNN has not been able to independently corroborate. Exactly 1 month later, the Treasury Department designated Cartel de los Soles as a foreign terrorist organization, allowing U.S. forces greater freedom of action against suspected members of the organization. Other South American countries, such as Argentina, Ecuador, and Paraguay, issued similar designations in the following days.